Howdy, welcome to the Genesis. I'm Rabbi Josh. This week was a fun one. I had back on the podcast a very important guest, Shoshana Gugenheim Kedem, who is the director of Art Lab. Art Lab is the organization based on a program co-created by Shoshana and I that is the sponsor of the Genesis podcast. Now, Shoshana and I sat down for a conversation way back in season 2, episode 3. So if you want to get to know her and her work, you should check that out, because there we talk more about her background. She has quite an incredible story. Shoshana is a soferet, that is a Torah scribe, one of the few female Torah scribes in the world. She is an artist in her own right and a great person to talk with. But she and I really are talking about Art Lab, its journey thus far, how this year is going, why we believe Art Lab is important, the challenges of running a Jewish organization of this sort at this moment, etc. It's a really great conversation, good insight into what it takes to get this kind of cultural work done. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Shoshana Gugenheim Kedem. Shoshana Gugenheim Kedem, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks.
It feels strange to welcome you as a guest, as though we haven't worked together hand in hand for the last many years. But we're doing so because we're not quite at the midpoint of the year, but we're a chunk into this new year with you directing and leading very successfully Art Lab, and my role having shifted to host of the podcast and rabbinic advisor.
You and I co-created Art Lab, and it was under the umbrella of CoLab, and now Art Lab is its own organization. Yes. I know a lot of you are confused, and people ask me all the time. Like, even one of our Art Lab fellows asked me recently, but I just don't understand.
Oh, really? So, back in 2021, I started something called CoLab Reimagine Jewish. And CoLab Reimagine Jewish had its finger in a lot of pies, its hands in a lot of somethings, whatever it was. There were a lot of different things. We did the psychedelic renaissance. We did a ginormous drag Purim celebration. We did classes. We did a food festival. But the very first program that I designed, it came out of a conversation I had with Alicia Jo Rabins, was Art Lab. And as soon as Alicia Jo said, gee, why don't we have an artist fellowship here in Portland? That could be really great. I thought that must happen. And the first phone call I made was to Shoshana. We met at Shoshana's house around her dining room table. And that was the beginning of the creation of Art Lab. So for 3 years, Art Lab ran as a program of CoLab. But starting this past July 1st, I guess, 2 things happened. One is I put CoLab on hiatus. So CoLab is not currently doing programming. And Art Lab became its own organization. And then internally, all of the resources of CoLab shifted over to Art Lab. And Shoshana became the director of Art Lab, which is, again, now its own independent organization. Shoshana directs it. And I serve as the rabbinic advisor and as the host of this podcast, which is funded by Art Lab. So Art Lab and CoLab are no longer bound at the hip. They share a dreamy, romantic history together, but Art Lab has moved on to its own independent life. Yeah. So my question to you, or to us, is why Art Lab? Why a Jewish contemporary arts fellowship? Why does it matter right now?
Yeah. It always feels like, I can answer that in one sentence, but it also feels so enormous, right? Because we're always asking ourselves that about any organization. Yep. I think for me, it feels obvious because my life is made up of a 30-year art practice. So it's what I know and do. So it's my language. And so that's the obvious to Shoshana answer. But the challenge that I have as an artist, as an arts administrator, as a culture maker is conveying the importance and the necessity
So actually,
to the rest of the world.
Before you go on, I just want to say I think that is such an interesting, widely shared challenge, really probably for anybody running a nonprofit of this kind. And I remember that was I look back, it's maybe, I don't know if it was arrogance or just naivete, but the difficulty I had initially in raising money was, it was just so self-evident to me. Like, what do you mean, why? What do you mean, why am I? Right. It's like, because we're Jews, we create stuff all the time and we try new things and we grow and we bring people into what we do. It didn't occur to me that I was going to have to, of course, make the case. So yeah, I identify with that.
Yeah. And, it's so great that we're having this conversation at this very moment, because last night we hosted Rabbi Adina Allen, who read from her book, The Place of All Possibility. And she didn't do a lot of reading. There was a lot of conversation, but the little bit of reading that she did was so spot on to this exact conversation, because she talked about the act of creation. Mm-hmm. That is what it means to be human, is to be a creative being.
Right. Yeah, it's our nature.
And when she, and she could say it much more eloquently than I can, and it's there in her book, and she just talks about Bereshit bara, and that, the rabbis questioning, well, why wasn't the first letter of the Torah Aleph instead of Bet, which it is the second letter of the alphabet, not the first letter of the alphabet. And it has to do with this creation, with like two beings being created that are in dialogue with each other.
Right.
And that could be God and humans, or humans and humans, but there's a presence of dialogue and interaction that is part of the process of being human.
And by the way, for people who are, if you're just tuning into this podcast for the first time, Shoshana just referenced Rabbi Adina Allen. And if you want to hear my conversation with her, you can go back to episode 20 of this season.
Yeah. And, she really brought into focus how creativity is just a part of the larger, like if we were to call it the larger God plan, and we are created in the image of God, then our necessity here on earth in this lifetime is to be creative spirits. Like that's what we are called to do.
And so you see Art Lab is both an expression of your creative spirit, but it's also a vehicle for other people to express their creativity in a Jewish context.
Yeah. And this is just sort of setting up the framework of talking about the necessity of art. And what's interesting also, and this is a question that previous to the conversation I asked, or the public event, I asked Adina, or just pointed out that Art Lab is in a bit of a different place, in that Adina's work is so beautifully centered around process, and our work is very beautifully centered around we make work because we're called deeply to do it, and we do it in a way that can be shared with the public. The work that happens in her process isn't shared with the public, but it's a process for deepening the Jewish experience for those individuals and the collective.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, ours is a process of deepening the Jewish experience because of the dialogue that we're in individually as artists as well. And then that dialogue moves out into the public sphere.
Right.
So, yeah. So to answer that question, I feel like, I have recently taken an interest in going through the Torah and writing down and noting all of the places where there are objects. And this is sort of how I took my own journey into understanding who I am as a Jew, was through the making of the ritual objects, but not in the way that they are traditionally made, but in really blowing that up into my own interpretation. Yes. So I feel it's like what you were saying earlier. I don't know if that was before we started recording, but art and artists make our world richer and more meaningful, and open up dialogue and allow pays into understanding who we are as humans and as Jews that we don't have access to otherwise. I mean, we can all think about the experience of listening to music or being at a play or acting in a play or being in the studio or walking into a gallery. I mean, all of those things bring meaning to our lives.
Awesome. So that's a great place to start, because it's almost like the most, so in answering the question, why Art Lab, it's like you're going to the most fundamental, because it's part of our essential humanity. It's part of our essential Jewishness. I would then another layer, and these layers are, in terms of answering the question, why Art Lab, these are not necessarily in order of importance or anything, but I'll just, from my experience, more broadly speaking, the kind of work we do, when I became a rabbi, and I served for 14 years as a rabbi, first in Boulder and then in Portland, the synagogue was filled with wonderful people. But it's also the case that a lot of wonderful and creative people with a lot of Jewish vitality were not part of synagogues. And, as soon as I left synagogue life, I became so aware of two things. One is that the Portland, and it's true nationally, was filled with Jews doing really cool, interesting, creative, fascinating, Jewish-y kinds of things, or just Jewish people engaged in the world in creative ways who had no connection to synagogues and therefore weren't necessarily part of Jewish community. And I found that a lot of those folks were yearning for some kind of connection to Jewish community, but not the ones that had already existed. They were not going to go join a synagogue for whatever reason. So I would say that's another answer for why is Art Lab, and why are programs like Art Lab. So just adding that to yours, because it's a benefit to Jews and it's a benefit to Jewish community to open doors to Jewish connection.
And to the rest of, into non-Jews too. There were plenty of non-Jews in the room last night, and I really appreciated that. And also the question,
folks outside of the Jewish community who came to hear Rabbi Allen.
Yeah,
right.
I'll say that yes, about the point that you just made is essential, because for me, I'm really, really interested in how we can create a framework for those Jewish artists to find a home in their Judaism.
Yes.
To a home or to deepen their connection. And art for me is the most obvious way to do that and the most familiar. So, and building on my own experience, sort of knowing that, okay, well, this is how I sort of made my way back to my Jewish identity, was really through my art practice, through the topics that I was exploring, through the ways that I was practicing, through the things that I was making and continued to do. And I'm really interested in what happens when we get into a space together. And I'm speaking now specifically about the fellowship, which is really the flagship program, right, of Art Lab. I still have to say to people, so the Art Lab Fellowship is the flagship program, but Art Lab has become more than that. And so it used to be that if someone said Art Lab, those of us who understood and knew Art Lab, we knew we'd say Art Lab, and we know that Art Lab was the cohort.
Right.
And even just the other day, I was having this conversation with someone who was part of Art Lab, and I said, Art Lab is so much more now. It is the cohort, and I'm speaking specifically to this notion of being together in the room. The fellowship is very much an important part of what we do because of the community and the network that we're building. And these artists then later go out into the world and they're interfacing with the public. Right. They've gone through this experience of building this beautiful network and community of contemporary Jewish artists with each other and with the other cohorts. Then they're going out and they're teaching workshops.
Amazing.
They're bringing their work to the public through exhibitions or through performance. We're hosting events for them and for other people. They're featured on the podcast. And I have to say, the podcast has been so amazing because, we spend these 9 months together in the fellowship. And there's a lot of real vulnerability and intimacy that's built there. Right. But the podcast has brought out a whole nother window onto the lives and practice and thought of these artists. And that's been really amazing.
Yeah. By the way, I'm so just bringing these two things together. I'm so excited to interview each of the artists in the current cohort, because right now we've talked on this podcast with almost all of the alum. I never know. Alumna. But I'm really excited to delve with the current artists. Incredible group this year's cohort.
Yeah. I mean, every year. So, what do I want? Like, what do I want to come out of Art Lab? First, I want to build community. I want people to feel like they're finding their Jewish home.
Yeah, that's...
Even if they might, and some of them might have another Jewish home, but what we keep hearing consistently is that it does really feel like home. Like, oh, I finally found a place where I can really just feel like, wow, I belong here as a Jewish person. And that is something that not everybody finds that at a synagogue, and not everybody finds that at a JCC, or even at a place like the EJC, which is not a religious institution and is also a cultural arts institution as part of what it does. I think it's the real intimacy and the ongoing way in which we do our work, and people are consistently meeting up.
I just want to amplify that a little bit, because I think, we began at the beginning by talking. We began at the beginning, as people often do. At the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about how it can be difficult to convey to people like who aren't plugged in already to understand the importance of this work and why it's valuable. When we ask the question, why Art Lab, it's so obvious to you and I that it takes a minute to articulate it. But if there's one thing I would want people to know who are like, what is this? A Jewish Artist Fellowship? Is the kind of feedback that we get from artists that, you just mentioned, like people, literally somebody said, I finally found my home, but also some telling us, I never really thought of myself as a Jewish artist before, or people not just finding their Jewish home, but finding themselves as Jews through the program. I think was, to me, one of the most moving and gratifying parts of this work. And I don't know if people are aware. It's not just that we're facilitating the work and bringing Jewish artists together and showing their work. It has a profound impact on the lives of people engaged in it.
Yeah. I mean, what we know coming into, and again, we're specifically talking about the fellowship, and Art Lab is more than this now. But what we know when we assemble everyone in that room for the first time is that these are solid artists.
Right.
But what we don't know is, where are they on their Jewish journeys? Are they feeling estranged? Are they feeling deeply connected? Are they looking for Jewish community? Is this, and I think what happens is that suddenly this place where people are really comfortable because they're practicing artists in the world, that merges with their Jewish identity, and a whole new space opens up for them.
It's true.
And I love that. I love that.
So, okay. So connecting to that, to the artist's own personal exploration of their Jewish lives and Jewish identity, and reconnecting to the question of why Art Lab at this moment, will you talk a little bit about how would you describe the significance of October 7th and its the subsequent years in terms of its impact on Art Lab, and how would you tell people what the import of that was for this program?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because I was going to say to you, let's talk about the gallery, and let's talk about,
we'll get there. I do want people to know about those other.
But I'm specifically saying that because the gallery that I want to say that we opened, but we showed we had a few shows there. One of them was in response to October 7th, and I'll speak more about that. But we haven't quite gotten the funding that we need in order to really run the gallery in the way that we would like to. And so it's on pause right now, but there's a really lovely vision for the gallery, and that was specifically a response to October 7th, and this feeds into your question. And the reason is because both locally and nationally, it became very obvious. Well, I'll start with myself in the local. Like, I was hearing things from peers and observing things about ways in which Jewish artists were feeling uncomfortable. I mean, uncomfortable doesn't feel like that's really covers.
Yeah, it doesn't go deep enough. Yeah, we're struggling. They were feeling marginalized, hurt, threatened. Yeah.
There was censoring, there was pulling of shows, there was canceling of book contracts and movie showing. I mean, anything that artists do to get their work out into the public, those things were being canceled. Jewish artists were being marginalized. I was hearing this from people on the West Coast. I was hearing it from people on the East Coast through other work that I do there in the Jewish arts community. And Canvas, who are our largest supporters, they did a national survey of Jewish artists and culture makers. There were over 600 people who responded to that survey, and they found the exact same thing. So we all knew what the answer was, but to see it in the survey was really important and meaningful. So even previous to the results of that survey coming out, I already felt like we need to create a place where Jewish artists can show their work and feel like they belong in this space. Right. And they can, and we're not saying that this work is on in any particular place on the political spectrum, but it's a place where people can safely and bring their work, not only be accepted if their work is anti-Zionist, but also be accepted if their work is anti-Zionist, right. You know, like meaning like that everyone could feel safe and to really fully bring their expression there, because we were hearing that artists just weren't feeling that. So to me, it kind of felt like, let's do this and let's make it for contemporary Jewish artists of the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. And so the goal of ultimately is to, it's a gallery and project space. Yes. It's a space to experiment. It's a space to show emerging artists, but it's solely for Jewish artists. And that feels really important and significant and unique for this area.
Absolutely unique. Yeah. And, you know, was it the second or third cohort that started right after October 7th?
Yeah, right. So the third cohort's first meeting was on October 15th, 2023.
And we just talked about even by that time, even 1 week in, people were already feeling the sense of vulnerability as Jewish artists. But I just wanted to build on what you're saying and about.
Let me say one more thing about that. So I think, I said this last night because someone asked. I feel really proud of how you and I, who were in the room together every time we met for our cohort meetings, and we held that space, I think, really beautifully and successfully for everyone in the room who was feeling confused, hurt, sad, angry, divided. There was, everything that so many of us felt was present in that space. And we had a really remarkable year together.
It's really true.
And there was respect in the room. There was space for people to listen and to be heard. And I actually feel that we were able to build something that a lot of spaces have had a really hard time doing, where we can be together across those divides and really love and respect each other and not hold back.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. I hadn't really thought of that, but I have heard, you and I have both heard stories of organizations, operating in the same cultural space that we do, Jewish organizations that were just torn apart by October 7th. It had sort of the opposite effect for Art Lab, but not because there was total ideological uniformity. I mean, to be clear, it's not like Art Lab is some ideological program to begin with, but October 7th did lend itself to processing very complex thoughts and feelings among what turned out to be a somewhat diverse group of people. And when I say what I mean is there were some people who really struggled with Israel's response and with what was happening. There were other people who felt like awakened as Zionists for the first time, but it was never acrimonious. It really, there was a real beautiful creation of a safe place of diversity and just Jewish consciousness. And it's sort of to your point, Jewish artists needed a place where they could process, think out loud, create out loud, and not be held to and forced into taking some, political position that they felt didn't capture all of them. So yeah, it was pretty powerful.
And that wasn't possible and still may not be possible. I can't speak, for everybody, but what we were hearing is that exact thing was not possible in other art spaces. Yeah. And I hear still that it is very, very hard. So I think that built this, that was, allowed people to sort of tumble into the space like completely. I mean, there were so many tears and people like, you could see in people's body language how they were suffering and just to get across that threshold and just take a breath and be in space with other Jews and know that you don't agree with everyone, but you're there and you're with your people and you can have a conversation and we can hear it. And, and again, that didn't always happen and doesn't always happen in Jewish spaces, but I feel really proud about the way we were able to navigate that.
Yeah. And I would say, just if there's any artists thinking about Art Lab as part of their future down the road, something that they might want to apply for. Look, you and I have both in various ways put on the table our own love for Israel and the impact that living there has had on us. And I think it's true to say that we really have created a space of open dialogue and diversity on this issue. And so my experience of Art Lab is that as long as you're a person who can be in Jewish community with respect and curiosity about other people, Art Lab will be a place that can be a safe and nurturing and nourishing place for Jewish artists, regardless of your politics. There's not some kind of ideological test. I think that's kind of the point we're making here.
Yeah. And I think, that people probably wonder that about us because I'm Israeli and, you are very outspoken about your, it changed, like your views changed and your language changed over time as you were putting out pieces that you were writing, representing Collab, which Art Lab was a part of. We talked about this last night with Adina. Art Lab hasn't made any kind of statement. I don't feel that we necessarily need to. I would like to take the lead that Canvas has done and create a value statement, which which really became a necessity for a lot of institutions, particularly cultural arts institutions. And they've spent many months through a very intense process of creating that. And I think that's something I look forward to.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And by the way, so Shoshana has mentioned a couple times now, Canvas. So two things. I interviewed Lou Cove, who, in fact, there were 2 episodes. I think I had Lou's interview played over 2 episodes. It's really, for those who are curious about the broader Jewish arts and culture scene, if you search for Lou Coe's episode on this podcast, it's really enlightening because he heads Canvas, which has been such an important part of Art Lab's journey, not only in terms of funding, but also just in terms of it's been a wonderful thought center for how to approach some of these more difficult questions. So why don't you...
Yeah, and this week we just got $50,000 from
Mazel
Canvas,
tov.
which is
Mazel tov.
A grant for the next 2 years. And it's acknowledgement of the strength of the work that we're doing. Of course, it doesn't fund everything, but it says, hey, you guys you're on it. You're doing something that's really meaningful and important, and we want to fund you, and we want other people to fund you.
So I'll tell you what, I was going to ask you to describe the other parts of Art Lab and then talk about funding. But since you just brought it up, let's stay on this for a minute, because I want to just acknowledge I want people to understand Canvas is an incredible organization that has really breathed life into what they call the 21st century Jewish cultural renaissance. But it's not an infinitely wealthy organization. And I'm pointing that out because it's extraordinary. There's a small handful of organizations across the country that they have said, these people are onto something important. And Art Lab is one of those. And that's really something extraordinary. Out here in Little Portland, Oregon, this program is garnering national attention and now international attention, by the way, with Israel, the Biennale, which we can talk about later. So, funding is obviously critical. Having Canvas's investment in Art Lab is wind in your sails, and it's good all around. But what would you say, no matter what nonprofit somebody runs, it ain't easy finding funding. What would you say has been the most challenging part of the funding question? I don't know if that's...
I mean, it's a little unfair because someone else just asked me this. My mentor asked me this recently. It's a little unfair because I haven't been through the full cycle yet. So I'm still learning, although I've been working as an artist and applying for grants, but now I'm doing it in a little bit of a different way because as the leader of this organization, I'm going directly to people and asking for support. And also I'm through your leadership and the past several years of Collab, there's a real sort of ease into past donors who are repeat donors. But I think I'll just give an example. You mentioned the Biennale. I was on a Zoom call with Rami Ozeri, who is the founder of the Jerusalem Biennale. And
you're gonna, as long as you're telling the story, you got to give a 60-second description of the Biennale, because most people have no idea what this is.
Yeah, so I call it the Biennale because I'm Israeli and that's what they call it in Israel. But everyone else in the world calls it the biennial. Sorry, I had to find the word there. And it's the largest exhibition of contemporary Jewish art that exists in the world. And it started, I think, 2013. I showed work in it in 2015. It's really for curators who want to bring artists to the Biennale, and it's happening in Jerusalem in May of 2026. And a proposal to show the work of our Art Lab artists was accepted. And we, please God, are heading to the Biennale in May.
Incredible.
Yeah. And, it is not without its own political complications and questions and all of these things. I am not somebody I'm not a cancel culture person. So I feel that it is really important. I feel it's important for us to be there, and not because we're there to make some statement about the Israeli government, because we're there as artists and culture makers. And I think that the more that we can lean into and have open conversations about the context within which we're bringing our work there, the better off we all are as people, Jews and artists, humans in the world. So,
it's the Biennale is such an incredible achievement. I mean, Mazel Tov. It's such a big deal to have Art Lab have this international presence in Israel, and it's just so exciting. Really wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, I found out that there were 150 proposals submitted and they accepted 30. And so I feel, I'm so excited about our artists. I mean, it really speaks to the strength of who comes through this fellowship program.
Incredible.
And I'm very excited about that. But I was going to say about,
Well, I wanted to take a swipe at offering a partial answer to my own question about the funding, the challenge of funding. But if I interrupted you, then I'll let you finish.
Oh, well, yeah, I was starting to talk about Rami. So, Rami Ozeri, the founder of the Biennale, and I got on a Zoom call last week, and we were talking about funding, because in an ideal world, the Biennale would be able to pay for all of our work to come over and bring the artists and cover all of the expenses. And, they have that for some of the exhibitions, but they can't do it for everyone. And we knew this going in. And he said to me, which is part of this bigger conversation, he said, I can't, when someone says to me, I'm giving 500,000 shekel to help people post-trauma, I can't come up. I just feel like internally, I can't come up against that. I don't know how to navigate that.
Wait, hold on. I'm not understanding. So,
meaning that if someone, trauma, like dealing with trauma, people who have soldiers and all kinds of all kinds of trauma treatment efforts that are on the ground in Israel, and people are dedicating their money to that. And for him, he's really struggling with exactly the question that, and this is incredible, because he is the person who runs the largest exhibition of contemporary Jewish art in the world.
So let me so for people listening who don't know, one of the things that's happened post October 7th is a huge discussion within Israel, which obviously has a whole, conversation about funding around it, about addressing trauma of Israeli citizens, Israeli soldiers, because, there's been a tremendous amount. And so it sounds like this donor came to him and said, I can offer you money for this very specific thing, which may or may not resonate with the needs of the Biennale. Is that your point?
What he's saying is that a donor, and we've had something similar, donors will come to him and say, okay, I'm giving 500,000 shekel this year for soldiers who are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't have money to give to the Biennale.
I see.
That he doesn't even want, there's a certain kind of like hesitation in even asking for that money in the first place, because we start to do this prioritizing in our head. Like, how can I ask for $500,000 when I know that money would be quote unquote better served? And I think it's the place where, and that is really hard, right? Yeah. Like, we've had responses of, I'm giving this year to food insecurity, and I don't have money to give to Art Lab. And what we do know, statistically speaking, is that 2 to 3% of all money that's given in the Jewish world goes to fund Jewish arts. And that has changed. Yeah. And because of exactly what we were saying, is that the work that we're doing is helping people have more meaning in their lives as Jews, and their lives richer, and also making the landscape of Portland richer and more alivened. And so that's the game that we all play, because that's how we were raised. We were raised in a society that kind of prioritizes helping others, of course, which is something we all want to do, over art and the arts, except that what we do understand is that it makes us better humans, and it serves us in so many ways. So it's sometimes hard to put that all in order it's true.
And we have come up against this in, very recently in funding within our orbit and our Art Lab's orbit and Art Lab's funding, that some donors have said, currently we're addressing some real problems in Portland with homelessness or whatever it might be. And, that's a real struggle for donors. And I think, sometimes when people like you and I are so passionately attached to something, we can forget that other people and funders and donors, whether it's a large donor or a small donor, they're also sorting through their own challenges and priorities. But I would say this. First of all, if you're listening to this you should go to artlabpdx.org and you should make a contribution. Literally every dollar matters. If you can make a contribution of $1.80 or $1,800 or somewhere in between, it helps. But I would also, let me go back to what's difficult about fundraising for a project like this within the Jewish world. I would say,
now you tell me. You have more experience.
No, you'll relate to it. That you and I see up close the unbelievable impact that this work has on young Jews and older Jews, on Jewish community, at a time when when synagogues and other Jewish institutions are increasingly alarmed about people becoming less connected to Jewish community, young people drifting away from Jewish life, at a time when people are more concerned with anti-Semitism, with anti-Zionism. You and I see this program that is addressing every single thing on that to-do list of the Jewish community. We're bringing people closer to Jewish life. We're showing people how to different ways to creatively integrate Jewishness into their lives that they might not have found otherwise. We're creating spaces where people feel they can be in Jewish community without fear of anti-Semitism shutting them down. We're helping people think about their connection to Israel through the Biennale. We see this. We could add up the numbers of people who have connected to Art Lab beyond just the cohort circle, but the number of people who have been to Art Lab programming this year since September is probably around 200, right? If you add up the different public events. So it's, we're not just, we're not just talking about like 8, 9, 10 artists in the cohort, which, in my opinion, is itself worthy of funding. But if you look at the broader impact and the ways that Art Lab and other Jewish culture programs are answering the questions of how do we sustain Jewish community in the 21st century, for me, the greatest challenge was seeing that up close, day to day, week to week, and then turning to donors for whom it's the innovative nature of this kind of work, the newness of it, made it hard for them to see the value. And I understand that. Because I think some people tend to see art as, well, it's a luxury, but when I look at it through the lens of what the Jewish future needs, it's not a luxury. This kind of work must be sustained because it's really addressing some of the deepest challenges that we're facing as a Jewish community. So, and
we, like, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about, this desire that I have to go through the Torah and to name and identify and start to work with all these objects. It's that, we couldn't have built the Beit HaMikdash.
Right.
We couldn't have built anything that allowed for us to come together in ritual and community without the artists.
Right.
And I think today, like, how many people go to movies, listen to music, go to the museum, have art in their homes, everything. We all have all of those things. Yes. And then we need to learn that and see the artists and the power of the artists and how the artists help us understand the world differently, different points of view, and have a deep emotional experience. And one of the things that Adina talked about, that's one of the 5 principles of the Jewish studio process that I just loved, is follow pleasure.
Yeah.
And we're so, and I think that bumps up against what I was saying earlier, like that there's a sense that, no, like there's this sort of American, sort of Puritan, Calvinist kind of thing of like pleasure, but it's such a Jewish thing, right?
Joy and pleasure. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right. And so important. And art brings us joy. Not always. That is not the goal. Right. It is certainly not the goal, but it is one very important aspect, even when it's hard, even when it makes us think, even when it's bumps up against our ideas and preconceived notions. It's just so important.
Yes, it's so true.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, if you're hearing this and you want to learn more, or you suddenly decide that you want to make a contribution to Art Lab, you can reach Shoshana at artlabpdx.org, or you can reach out to me. I'm Rabbi Josh at artlabpdx.org, but I'll also put all that stuff in the show notes. Okay, so you mentioned the cohort program, which you said is the flagship of Art Lab. Briefly describe that, and then if you would just tell folks what are the other components of Art Lab.
Yeah. So when Art Lab began as a program of collab, we began with our fellowship cohort, which we still run. We're in our 4th cohort this year. So we have a network now of 38 artists. These are contemporary Jewish artists. Most of them are professional artists, but not everyone. But they're serious about their practice, and they're distinctly working in contemporary art practice as opposed to perhaps the very important role of Judaica artists who are making more traditional ritual objects. And so these folks come together, these artists come together once a month for a 4-hour session. And we are really getting to know each other as artists, getting to know each other's work, and doing Jewish identity work, really doing critical review of our work as artists, getting feedback, and studying text. And we choose a topic every year. And this year's topic is memory. So we have different educators from the community who are coming in and leading those text studies.
And when you say text study, generally Jewish texts, sometimes Torah, sometimes Talmud, can be more contemporary.
Anything in Jewish texts. This year it's a little bit different because up until now, Josh, you've been doing all of the text studies, which has been wonderful. And we're trying a new model this year where we're having different educators, scholars come in and teach on the subject of memory. And so it's really lovely to introduce the artists to these different amazing thinkers in the community. And this year we're working with Alicia Jo Rabins and you, Rabbi Josh Rose, and Dr. Yosef Rosen. And so that's really a wonderful addition to what we're doing. And then the artists are creating work over the course of the year that is in response to this theme as it's unfolding through conversation, through these text studies, through their process outside of our cohort meetings. Our upcoming session is being held at the Oregon Jewish Museum, and we'll meet with Rebecca Sobel, who's the new director at the museum. We really try to connect the artist, build connections for the artist at the museum. And that happens by being on site, by having them get to be in conversation with Rebecca and Mariah also, who's there, Mariah Berlanga.
Mariah was on this show earlier this season. You can find her, and Rebecca Sobel, who directs the museum, will be a guest shortly in the next few weeks.
So we have that. So again, that cohort is really very central to what we do and is where we started. And we've expanded now and last year we started doing public arts workshops. So drawing from this fabulous collective of Jewish artists, we invite them to teach a 3-hour workshop. Anywhere that they want to do that, we support them to teach that. It's open to the public. Those have been in writing, in puppetry, in food preparation, chefing, cooking,
dance,
zine making,
dancing,
movement. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Because we're drawing from our artists who are part of that cohort, have been filmmakers and visual artists and poets and novelists and dancers, choreographers. So, someone asked me last night, these are artists in the broad sense of artists and creatives, not just, certainly by no means are we just visual artists. So there's the fellowship, there are the workshops, there's this podcast, which has just been such a wonderful addition to what we're doing because, like I said, we're learning. So the conversations that are happening are fabulous. The way the artists are thinking, hearing how they're thinking now versus where they were before they came into Art Lab, hearing about work that they're creating. A lot of it, which is influenced by their time in the cohort. And then that podcast, which is mostly focused on our alumni, but not only Jewish creatives in the Pacific Northwest. Jewish creatives who are coming through town. Yep. And so we've had some international reach, and we'll be interviewing an artist from California. And we're really looking for artists all over the Pacific Northwest, which feels really important and unique again to our region. And the last thing is the gallery, which we talked about. And as I said, right now is a little bit on pause. We will use the gallery space we do an exhibition and performance at the end of the cohort for the public. We usually get like 100, 150 people there, and we will use that gallery space. But our goal is to have a more permanent space, which right now is inside the Eastside Jewish Commons, that we can curate and run. And they're aiming for that. We're just not.
Yeah, and I'll just say, that gallery, because we did use that space for some time, and at a couple of moments, it was really incredible to have a space dedicated to contemporary Jewish artists. And I think, if this is a thing that eventually takes hold, because you've indicated it's a little bit of a reach right now, but it's a goal, I think it would be the only gallery in the Pacific Northwest that's dedicated to contemporary Jewish artists. Is that right?
Possibly. I mean, distinct from the museum, who does amazing, the Oregon Jewish Museum, who does amazing and really important work. Often museum settings are really spaces for artists who are at the top of their game, right? And we want to create a space for emerging artists and for experimentation. And I don't personally know of any other place in the Pacific Northwest that's doing that specifically for Jewish artists. I would love to know if there are. I would be delighted to know. But so that's what's really exciting.
By the way, you reminded me something we didn't talk about, but there's maybe down the road we'll get back to it. But the ways in which Art Lab has supported and other organizations have supported Art Lab in a really beautiful relationship. And the Jewish Museum comes to mind because we've met there. They've shared in their newsletter. They've shared little briefs about our artists, and they've even shown that one of the Art Lab artists has their work on there as part of their collection, Daniela Molnar. So the museum has been a wonderful partner, and of course, Dr. Yosef Rosen, who's a great teacher working with the artists, is part of Federation's outreach to the community as well. So I just want to acknowledge that, no organization sustains itself alone, and there's been a great partnership with other institutions here.
Yeah. And of course, the Eastside Jewish Commons, which has, hosted us and just continues to be an incredible partner. So, and for me, that's how I work. Like, it is many partnerships as we can make with institutions, Jewish, non-Jewish, across the city. We also send our artists to Southwester, which is a really funky kind of, it's set up for artists to do retreats out on the coast in Washington. Like, that's a partnership that started very early on for us. So, I'm just really interested in collaboration. That's my thing. I mean, that's what I do as an artist. So as much as we can continue to do that and create new collaborations and deepen our existing ones, I think it benefits everyone. It benefits Art Lab. It benefits the artists. It benefits everybody who's involved.
Okay, well, we certainly have much more to talk about. We've got to wrap up, so I'm going to make you answer the same questions I ask every guest. One is just tell us about one thing that you want people to know about, one thing you're loving that you want folks to know about.
It's funny because you asked me and I'm like glancing over to this, which you people cannot see.
Gorilla Girl.
This is... Okay. Yeah, this is a show of the Guerrilla Girls that's happening in LA. It just opened in November at the Getty Center. And I have been following the Guerrilla Girls probably since the 90s, but I've never actually seen any of their work. And it is very guerrilla, like the work that they do. And so I'm really curious to see how they're bringing that together in a physical space. And must get myself down to LA to go see that.
It's like an artist collective or something?
It is a radical artist, feminist artist collective that has also been a space that's been they've done a really great work pushing back against institutions and the presence of women in art institutions. So like I have on my wall here, the advantage of being a woman artist, which they produced many, many, many years ago. And I share that a lot. Like, just for instance, working without the pressure of success or not having to be in shows with men.
Wait a minute. Yeah, no, that's so my guess is people they probably have an online presence.
Yeah. So you check out the Guerrilla Girls and check out the Research Institute at the Getty Center where their work is being shown. It's really exciting to me.
And then finally, I mean, what is the best Jewish food?
Look, I mean, we're all about breads and spreads, right? Like when people invite us for Shabbos, they're like, bring your breads and spreads, which is our sun-dried tomato paste, our labneh, our hummus, our parsley pesto, our schug, so,
but
and then our homemade.
Any of those.
Yeah, and we make a sourdough gluten-free challah every week and a gluten-full sourdough bread every week. And so that's kind of our thing. We want to, at some point, our family wants to have people say, and we would love to, we can't ever get our heads around this, how we could have a stand at the farmer's market for our breads and spreads.
Oh, yeah.
But no one could ever
don't have enough going on yet. That would be awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Shoshana, that was fun. It was nice to look back and to take stock of where things are headed. And obviously, we'll see each other very soon. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Well, thanks, Josh.
Bye.